It's the thing that terrifies you. It's like Alien, same thing. I had a friend with a divorced dad, so I saw it when I was 8, and then I didn't sleep until I was 9, because it was awful. But it's the not knowing things. Not knowing things as a child is completely the opposite. It's almost a joy, right? If you think of, so one of my favorite days at primary school was being asked to walk to the front of the classroom, given a bottle of vinegar, and then the teacher looks at me and goes, Dom, okay, what's going to happen when you pour this in? And I had no idea. I had literally no idea what was going to happen. So I poured it in. The bicarbonate of soda volcano blew up everywhere, covered my trousers because I was standing too close to it. But I was so enthusiastic. I wanted to learn. I was curious. And take your parallel as an adult, where I walk to the front of the boardroom, and someone gives me some information, they give me a report, and they say, Don, what's going on with this? And I have no idea. It's terrifying, right? That's the last thing I want to do. And the difference seems quite obvious, right? We're paid experts. I'm standing on stage here now. You will do it for a job. You will do it for a job. Obviously, we should know this stuff. So that's part one. That's the first thing, is not knowing things is scary. The second part is SEO is hard to measure. Right? This is just a reality. And this is something that I am most exposed to when I go to a quarterly business meeting. And everyone sits down, SEO sits down, PPC sits down, and the C-level team, they turn to PPC and they go, okay, what did you do over the last quarter? And PPC sits there and goes, okay, so we wanted to sell more car insurance. So we thought, well, we want people to buy more car insurance. So I guess we'll just put that in our title tags, right? Buy more insurance. That'll work. And then they go away and they go, okay, so you gave us £16,000 in February. You gave us £16,000 in March. And then they hold up the little graph and they're like, look, 200 leads in February, 400 leads in March. All those changes, they worked. That specific change led to this amount of money. And then they turn to SEO. And of course, SEO wants to work with PPC. So we're like, well, we copied them and we did exactly the same thing. But we did it for SEO. And we tried to measure it as well. And then we go through it and we're like, okay, so we measured our organic traffic and when we put the title tags in, but there was some seasonality stuff, there was some industry stuff going on, so we looked at Google Search Console and there were some clicks, there were some impressions, but it didn't quite line up with Google Analytics, so we went and looked at search metrics. It looked good in search metrics. So we made a change and we got 500 search visibility. And everyone stares blankly and silence runs around the room. We get all our own metrics take us so far away because it is hard to measure, right? This is the truth of it. Seasonality, if it's a big part of your traffic, like for Skyscanner, for example, industry demand, when that fluctuates, it's going to change your measurement. And then even then, if you manage to isolate those two and to pick out the effect of individual changes you're making, Google goes and changes something, and you have no idea what you did. Of course, RIP Matt Cutts at this point. So how do we get around this? We get around this, firstly, we look at ranks. In theory, that rules out some of the seasonality, some of those effects. Then we go to click-through estimates, and we sit there with our graph of click-through rates and our rankings, and then we multiply one by the other with the search volume, so we can put it in traffic and numbers that people understand. And then when all that fails, we just wave our hands and it's going to work, right? Because when the going's good, no one really cares. They don't mind that our estimate was 5% out or it went up when we said it would go down, because everything's happy. But that's parts 1 and part 2. So it's scary not knowing things, and SEO is hard to measure. Your part 3 is SEO has become more individual. If you take a look at the ranking factors in 2015, and then in 2009 when they started it, there are so many more things now. It's gotten more complicated. This wouldn't be an SEO talk if I didn't mention rank brain, so rank brain. And in this context, it does actually make some sense. If it's machine learning and they don't understand all the inputs that's going into everything, it's obviously a lot harder to generalize from one thing to another thing. So that's our third bit, right? And we take all those three pieces and we put them together. And how does this come together? So we can't just copy the results of other people anymore and take their results, because they don't apply to us. But people still want to know, they still want us to measure the results we have. So they ask us to forecast beforehand, and then they ask us to measure after the fact. And we're experts, so of course we say we'll do this, because we're terrified to admit that perhaps this might be quite hard. And that's the other thing. We want the money. We'd like that internal budget. We want to make changes, so we're going to go along with it. And then we run into the realities, which is that SEO is hard to measure. It's not easy. And so we take all our click-throughs and our ranks and that sort of thing, and we try and come up with something in traffic, something in money. But it's all really just smoke and mirrors half of the time, right? It doesn't actually make any sense. But it means we get that money. So in the short term, we've got a nice big pile of it. But it also means our estimates are just probably likely to be wrong, which is great when the sun is shining and everything's working well. But as soon as things go downhill, it leads us into trouble. And then once you've been burned by this a couple times, maybe you decide, okay, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to caveat all my things. I am going to say, we'll just do this in ranks. And then at that point, you're just very unconvincing, and no one believes you, and then you lose all the money. And so we end up, at the end of all of this, with a CV that maybe looks something like this. SEO manager at T-Search and Shorts. I reduced the dev backlog, did some projects, did some management. I went away and I removed a penguin penalty. And if I'm lucky, well, look, my traffic went up. I can't tie it to any of the specific things I did. It just went up while I was there. And if I'm unlucky, perhaps I joined this industry in a downturn, then those session numbers, I can't even show those. Because technically, even though perhaps my percentage of the market went up, my overall share went down. So that's our problem. How do we fix that? How do we make ourselves more convincing? How do we get the money back? And the answer is really just taking inspiration from other people. We go back to that first point, and we stop making guesses about our results. We copy CRO and we copy growth hacking, who have been doing it right this entire time. Let's suppose that I worked in growth hacking or UX for The Guardian. There's this big hero image up at the front of the page. I'm like, okay, people love these hero images. Look how attractive that pesto looks. Oh, I'd love to eat that pesto. I'm going to click on that. And they go, okay, great. Why don't we just, someone suggests, well, people love those images, right? Why don't we just have 2 of them? Wouldn't that be great? Then we get twice as many clicks. No CRO or UX person worth their salt is going to say they can tell you the effect of that change. They're going to go, I have no idea. Let's test it. See how it goes. And that's where we have to get to with SEO. That's where we're going to. Because when we can test things and measure things properly, all of these other problems just sort of melt away and disappear. And we become more convincing and more compelling. So that's what we've been doing. For the past 9 months or so, and we've been building stuff for it for years before that, we've been trying to do SEO split tests. Properly good SEO, mathematically rigorous split tests. That's worth, if people are not so familiar with this, banging on the point, what is an SEO split test? Suppose I take all my product pages, I split them into 2 groups. If you're familiar with some of the CRO stuff, this language should be vaguely familiar. Your control group and your variant group. I make a series of changes to my control pages. Sorry, I leave my control pages alone, and I make a series of changes to my variant pages. Perhaps that I take all my product pages on my website, and I change the title tag on half of them. And then I see which half gets more traffic. That's different from a typical CRO test, where you get the same set of pages, but different users see different things. So SEO split testing is splitting pages, and CRO testing is splitting users. I'm also now about to show you two graphs a lot. So it's worth briefly taking a look at this graph. This graph is showing you, firstly, two things. It's showing you these two lines. This is our control and our variant group. Black is the variant, right? It's the set of pages we made the change to. And blue, treat blue as the control. So in this particular example, if the blue line goes higher, it's a negative test because our variant is performing worse than the control. If the black line is higher, then it's a positive test, and we go great, and we made more traffic and made more money. As you can see in this case, this is a negative test. This is the start date, so everything to the left of that red line is just historical data. And then everything to the right is what happened after we made the change. The second graph shows total additional sessions. So the other one is showing the traffic by day. This is a summed graph. The fans either side of it show margin for error. So in this case, we're losing addition each day. We're going, OK, up until this point, we've lost this amount total in traffic. This is why there's a margin for error on it. A test becomes significant when that fan touches the red line on 0. And in this particular test, it happened here. And then when we put these two graphs together, this is what it looks like. And we can see the test wasn't very successful, so as our traffic dropped, our total estimated sessions went down. Wonderful, right? Hopefully at this point, some of you are thinking, great, I do have some problems with budget. I do have some problems with being able to measure things. I would like to go and challenge some established SEO wisdom. So let's jump into 5 of the tests that we've run up until this point. So the first one is adding alt tags. For all of these, well, for most of these examples, I'm going to use Argos. We don't actually work with Argos, but for the case of getting sign-offs from clients, I can't show you all of them. So when I'm working for a hidden e-commerce site that I can't mention, I'm showing Argos. So established SEO wisdom would say that alt tags are good for SEO. Right? Labeling your image, oh, good Lord. Labeling your image means that Google will have a better understanding of what the picture is on your page. You'll have improved relevance, and you will gain slightly more sessions. So that's what we went away. We took a large e-commerce site, and we added alt tags to all of their product pages. And absolutely nothing happened. So this is worth just recapping this graph at this point. As we can see past the start line, our estimated additional sessions is basically 0. All right, we've moved up and down a bit, but we're well within that blue margin for error. And when we took at the two graphs on the top, they line up almost perfectly. Look at a laser, look at that. So that's alt tags. As it turns out for our client, no effect at all. What about, there we go. Removing SEO content. I suspect most of you in the audience will be familiar with this. This is the category pages for televisions on Argos. Of course it has SEO text on the bottom because we have it on the bottom of all of our pages. Originally, we added it for Panda purposes. Category pages are lots of images, lots of text links, very little, lots of hard content. So we just assume that we need to add, the category pages look like thin content. So we need to add all this contextual relevance to it. So often at the bottom of a lot of pages, people will put these blocks of text. And we thought, OK, that's kind of old-fashioned now. Let's get rid of it. So this was e-commerce site number 1, where we went and we got rid of this SEO text from the bottom of from half of all their category pages. And in short answer, it's still bouncing around nothing. It looks like it's beginning to trend down, but basically we're getting a null possibly negative effect from it. Right? And then we went and did exactly the same test on another e-commerce site. And this time we had to wait a bit of a lag while they got indexed. But we saw an improvement, about an increase of about 3% in organic sessions from removing these blocks of SEO content at the bottom. So not only were they paying people to write this, but it was losing them money. It was losing them sessions. And what this really highlights is that you can't just take one thing and apply it to something else. That's just really not true anymore. It would be like if you went to a doctor and you're like, "Oh, doctor, my leg hurts. It's really giving me problems." And the doctor is going, "Oh, I just came back from Africa. I saw a guy with leg hurt. He had died. We need to take your leg off right now. We've got to get rid of that leg." You'd be like, "You're a moron. We're obviously different people. You can't just generalize and apply one thing to the next." It's the same thing here. We can't just generalize in our industry anymore. Number 3, using JavaScript to show content. So Google have said for a long time, we can render JavaScript. Right? This one was back in 2014. Removing the Ajax crawling was in 2015. They said they get it, right? We understand the web with JavaScript. And we had a client who had JavaScript disabled. With JavaScript enabled, their content didn't properly show on the page. So on the left with JavaScript disabled, the HTML is still there in the background, but on the right, when we enable JavaScript, we can see it's rendered properly. We saw this was a problem in their search console when we asked Google what to render the pages, so we went away and we fixed it. And as it turns out, it was a notable improvement for them. They brought in about an extra 6% worth of organic sessions to those category pages, which we measured and could attribute directly back to the change that we made. Setting exact match title tags. Again, this is another one that you've probably come across in your time up here, in your time working in SEO, which is you've been writing an article or a page, and you've had two terms, right? One of them has way more search volume than the other. So like, okay, we'll use that one for the article because more people are searching for it. This is the example with Argos again. So we had a client who had exactly this. They had these two phrases in their title. One was by far the most popular, and the other one was a lot less popular. So they switched it to the one that was more popular. They made the title tags exactly match the thing people were searching for more. And the traffic to their primary money revenue driving pages dropped by about 8%, and just straight off. Right? Split tests don't always have to be positive. They dodged a bullet here. They absolutely dodged a bullet. How many times in the past have you just rolled out a change like this without thinking about it and then struggled to measure it? Almost certainly it's probably happened to some of us in this room. I mean, why in this case? Because a split test doesn't tell you why. Plausibly, the best we'd come up with was that when they're very at the top of their game, in the top of their industry, the click-through rates of titles were far more important than whether or not it exactly matched. Number 5, adding structured data. I'm sure you'll have seen pages with review snippets, all that sort of stuff. Everyone's been convinced by that. Everyone knows they want the stars in the search results. Everyone wants that. Again, we had a large e-commerce client. Category pages, lots of images, not much text. Probably doesn't understand what's going on there. That was our worry. So we went and we marked everything up with structured data. So rather than saying there's text and images on this page, we wanted to say to Google, there are 40 products on this page, and this is what they are. So we went away and we marked this up when we ran out the test. And this was a large client, and this was to their primary category pages. It made them 11% extra organic sessions to those category pages. And to tie it back to the money, right? Because so far I'm tied it back to the money. This test, because they were a large site up until this point, has made them roughly £100,000 a month if you're sitting at about your average. And I can sit there and at the end of this, I can stick it on my CV. I can go made X, who isn't Argos, £100,000 extra a month from a change that I made, and I can directly tie back to it. It's a world away from what we've been doing. So how do you run your own tests? I'm running a little bit short on time, so this bit will be a little bit faster. How much traffic do you need? Broadly, we find you need around 1,000 organic sessions per day to whatever set of pages you're testing on. So that's what you need to do this. Now, you can definitely do it with less, and we've done it with less, and you can get sound results. But it just means your tests need to be stronger and more effective. The swings need to be bigger. And there's more chance that something else like an external sale might ruin your data. How long should you run a test for? Again, typically, 2 to 3 weeks we find is enough to reach significance and know whether or not this change is worth doing. Obviously, sometimes that's going to vary. It's going to be more, it's going to be less, but that's broadly it. What kinds of things are easy to test? Broadly, anything where you're making changes to a page and you expect to see the results of that on that page. So when I change my title tags on my products, I expect that to result in increased traffic to my products. If you're trying to do anything clever, like adding breadcrumbs and measure the effect of links on one section going to another, that's a lot harder. It's still possible, but it's just a lot more thought. Not where you want to start and convince someone about the power of this. And 4, how can you do all that maths, right? Look at those fancy graphs, all the maths that goes into it. Which is why for this talk, I built this. I mean, I say built this. Austin built this, and I reskinned it and made it do something slightly different. This is a new version of our Distilled forecaster. And this uses the same maths as the platform that we have. It uses the Google's causal impact library to go out there, and you give it 2 pages. You give it your sets of data, your control data and your variant data. You plug it into here, and it will tell you whether or not your test is significant. And you can see those lines there. There's a post also on here that I wrote of exactly how to use this tool, so you can go through and find it. You can find the tool here, along with the associated post that will explain it in a little bit more detail. You can also find all the slides for this talk, which are sitting up here. This bit.ly link is not live yet, because I was apparently very underprepared, but it will be live. Give me 10 minutes or so after this talk. And that's it. Thank you very much.